This is Keep Up. I'm your host, Cynthia Dill. It is Tuesday, May 6th, 2025. I'm in my Cape Elizabeth studio, and joining me again is Larry Benoit. Welcome to the show, Larry.
Well, good afternoon, Cynthia. Nice to join you again.
Yeah, thanks. It's nice to have you here. And this time, we're going to talk a little bit about the complaint that you and Marianne Lynch filed with the Ethics Commission in Maine. So why don't, if we could just begin the show with, could you please just describe basically what the complaint says and why you filed it?
Okay. Well, the complaint asks the Maine Governmental Commission uh, on government ethics and campaign practices to look into whether or not the Cape Elizabeth School Department should have filed a ballot question committee and related financial reports as a result of advertising that was done in connection with the ballot question last fall for a school bond and the current campaign for a ballot question on June 10th, this coming month. At that time, we felt that the department had been running a series of advertisements in the Cape Courier amounting to thousands of dollars expended, and these are, of course, taxpayer dollars, to advocate for and to influence the ballot question last November 5th and again on June 10th. And we supplied the commission with the rationale and some of the documentation, including copies of the advertisements and other financial information, to ask them to look into it.
What does the law say? Just summarize. What's the law say, and why do you think it was violated?
Well, the law says any person, and a person includes a corporation, individuals, and it includes municipalities, who receives or expends $5,000 or more to influence an election for a referenda question must register a committee with the commission and also file reports of campaign expenditures and a receipt on a schedule that's provided by the commission.
What do you understand the policy behind that? Why is there a law like that? Do you believe?
Right. Well, one of the principal guiding reasons that we did this is that we expect transparency, we expect accountability, and we expect compliance as taxpayers. I think we all expect that of our government, whether it's national, state, or local, in this case, local. And we're not seeing that from the school department. And we believe that the law is here to provide for that accountability and transparency and compliance to taxpayers. And again, these funds are tax funds that are being used for these advertisements, and they're clearly political. They're clearly intended to influence the ballot question. We have no quarrel with the school department providing information to the public on this proposal. This is not what this material is. Any objective reader who sees these advertisements, paid advertisements, would recognize them clearly as political, intended to influence voter opinion.
And so the question that the Ethics Commission will answer is whether or not the superintendent, acting on behalf of the school board, has to register as a ballot question committee.
Right.
But will the Ethics Commission answer the question that I think is on a lot of people's minds, and that is just whether taxpayer money can be spent in these types of campaigns? Because it always surprises me whenever I see the Cape Courier. It just surprises me that's how money is being spent. Is your complaint with the Ethics Commission going to answer that question about whether the legality of spending public funds in a campaign?
Right. We don't necessarily expect the commission to answer that question. We're not certain that it's within their jurisdiction, but it clearly is in the jurisdiction of the town council. So we separately sent a letter to the council a few days ago and pointed out that, in our opinion, the municipality, the school department, does not have the authority to spend taxpayer money to influence election campaigns and ballot questions, nor is there any indication in state law that they have that authority. But ultimately, the council is responsible for all of the tax dollars raised and spent under our charter. And the council has the authority to investigate any department. And so we ask the council to look into this matter and to prohibit the school department from spending any further funds to advocate, to electioneer, to influence this ballot question on June 10th, and to file the necessary retroactive registration and campaign finance reports to provide, again, the transparency and accountability that we think all of our taxpayers are owed here in Cape Elizabeth and elsewhere.
Now, just pushing back a little bit on the transparency, in some of the materials that I reviewed, it looks like you were able to get information about how much money has been spent. Is that fair? Do you have a sense of how much money we're talking about that's been spent to, in your words, influence the question?
Yes, well, we believe it's well in excess of $5,000. My co-complainant, Marianne Lynch, had requested last fall, and it was promptly supplied, a list of expenditures for courier advertisements and also broader categories of expenditure for the representational work that was done by a contractor to design and prepare those ads, because there's a significant cost involved with that. And in the aggregate, those services plus the cost of the ads, starting last summer into the fall and starting this winter up to now, ads are still running on the Courier. There's a new one. I have one right here that was run a week ago. This particular ad, talks about a new middle school effective long-term planning are both possible on June 10th, and it has a lot of electioneering and advocacy in it. So in any case, we believe that there is no authority to do this, and we pointed out, however, in the complaint with the commission, just as a matter of record, that the only case that we could find in Maine law courts was a case in 1991 involving the Maine Turnpike Authority. And what Justice Alexander, Don Alexander, ruled in that case, and it was a very complicated case, but one important ruling was that he said, without explicit legislative authority, no public agency can spend public funds for political advertising in support of ballot questions. That's the only case law that we were able to find. Maybe there's other, but it points out that in this particular ruling, that is the view of Don Alexander, who was one of our best Superior Court justices. I think he's well retired now.
Well, so it sounds like there's two tracks. There's the complaint that's
Yes.
being investigated by the Ethics Commission about the registration of a ballot question committee that spends more than $5,000, and then there's the request to the town council to prohibit future expenditures.
Yes.
Looking at both of those tracks, it seems to me, given the makeup of the town council, many of the majority were elected with a pro-school, bent, that you're not going to get the relief that you seek from the town council. And if I had to guess, if I was a betting person, I would say that there'd be a split vote to do nothing. And so then what would happen? I mean, what's the next step? Can you actually appeal to how do you move the ball if you wanted to after being rejected by the town council?
Yeah. Well, I don't have an answer to that yet because they've not acted, Cynthia, but it will be, of course, a disappointment if they don't, but not necessarily a surprise. I think if people set aside the politics of this and just look at the law and look at the obligations and responsibilities of our elected officials, their fiduciary obligation to the taxpayer, which is an important implied responsibility for all elected officials, that they would take the necessary steps to prohibit further expenditures by the school department to influence this election. All I can say is that we'll have to await their decision, and then based on that, if there is no decision, we'll have to take a look at what our options would be. But again, I want to point out that the town council has full authority over the amounts of tax revenues that are raised and expended. That's clearly in the charter. It's granted to the municipality of Cape Elizabeth by under state law and through our charter. So they really are the most important authority here. Otherwise, it would probably require a lawsuit, and that's not going to be productive since the election is just, 5 weeks away.
Well, speaking of being productive, do you think that the Ethics Commission is gonna act or decide anything before the June referendum?
I don't know. I mean, they have acknowledged the receipt of our complaint. The commission, has a lot of business before it. Its next meeting is not until the 28th of May, and whether or not it gets on the agenda, or even if it's on it, whether or not they would be in a position to make a decision, we just don't know. We've encouraged them to do a investigation and ask the school department to provide all of the information that would relate to the cost of these ads and particularly the production of these ads, because it's not, clear, because the numbers that we were given are covering broad areas of services. So it isn't entirely clear what portion of them is related to production and graphics design work for these ads. But taken in the aggregate, just the ads alone exceed $5,000.
I was surprised to learn. I don't know why I was surprised, but I was kind of surprised to learn that it is Harriman that does the ads. I don't know why I thought it would be an a different agency, but so it does strike me as difficult to separate, the work of Harriman, what is, advocating and what is campaigning versus, I guess, whatever else work that they do. But do you hope that either your ethics complaint or the, request of the town council will influence the election? I mean, are you doing this yourself to influence the outcome of the election?
Well, we just believe that tax dollars shouldn't be spent to influence the outcome of this election. I think the voters can make up their own mind on this issue. I don't think many would disagree with that opinion. We just want to find a way to, require, again, accountability, transparency, and to hopefully prohibit the further use of tax dollars to do this. And just to make a point here regarding Harriman, we have no issue with Harriman. They were hired, they're doing their job here to produce this material. Dr. Record signed a contract with Harriman just 10 days after the November 5th election, and included in that contract was the preparation and the design of 8 advertisements and 8 flyers specifically itemized in that, among many, many other services, of course. But again, we have no quarrel with Harriman here. They're just a contractor doing their job, just like anyone who's been hired by a campaign, or in this case, a school department, to do that kind of work.
If there's a finding by the Ethics Commission that the superintendent acting on behalf of the school board violated the reporting requirement or the registration requirement of the ballot, question committee, what do you know what the penalty would be? Would it be a fine, or is do you have any sense of what relief you'll get?
Well, it's a civil matter. It's not criminal. The commission can refer cases for criminal prosecution to the state attorney general, but that's done in cases, for example, where someone's receiving public financing and misuses or actually steals the fund. And unfortunately, that happens pretty regularly. We've seen it. It's hard to believe, but
I
it does.
know.
But at any rate, it would be civil penalties, and involving school department and so forth. It's hard to know exactly what the commission would do. Our view is we just want compliance. That's what we're looking for, and that's what should be provided by the school department.
There was a comment on a Facebook group page that after, a thorough investigation of their own, it was discovered that not a single municipality or school administrative district has ever registered as a ballot question committee. And that may be true. Do you have any comment about that?
Well, I know of just the South Portland case, and again, in that case, they didn't reach the threshold, so they didn't have to register.
Well, tell us a
But
little bit more about that South Portland case.
well, interestingly enough, Cynthia, that involved a referenda campaign where I was actually managing the opposition to. I was the manager for the statewide coalition that opposed the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. And that particular referenda question was on the ballot in 2009. And the Tabor forces saw that the city of South Portland was running advertisements urging voters to reject the Tabor referenda question. So they asked the commission to enforce the campaign finance law. And the commission found that, in fact, South Portland would be required if they met the $5,000 threshold. Now, the answer to that question is this: it's extraordinary, it's exceptional, because I've never seen, and I'm not aware
You
of
mean Cape
any.
Elizabeth's
Yeah,
situation
yeah,
is
Cape
exceptional?
Elizabeth. Yes, I've never seen anything like this in terms of advertising by local governments in support of school bonds. This is off the charts, and it's unprecedented, well, nearly unprecedented, because South Portland was doing it. They just didn't, go through the threshold. But that's really the answer to that question. That's how really outside the limits here that this is. And as a result, that's one of the main reasons we filed the complaint. I thought it was, incredibly egregious for this to be continuing as it did throughout last fall and into this new campaign for the June 10th ballot question.
And remind viewers who might not have had the pleasure of seeing your previous interviews on this show why it is you have kind of a perspective that unlike the ordinary, Joe on the streets. I mean, describe a little bit, please, your political background and what you have done in the past that informs your actions and thoughts at this moment.
Well, it really comes in two chunks. One, a 30-year career as a professional congressional staff as chief field rep for Senator George Mitchell, chief of staff to John Baldacci, field representative for Senator Edmund Muskie. I also worked for a member of Congress way back in the 70s. And then I retired from that career and established a government relations practice with my colleague Kay Rand, who was Angus King's chief of staff. And I was there for 10 years. And during that time, I was the lead manager for 5 statewide referenda campaigns. One of them, the Plesky tax cap, which we defeated, the first Tabor proposal, which we defeated, the second Tabor proposal, which we defeated, and we lost a close one involving tax reform referenda question that related to a tax reform package that passed the legislature and was put on the ballot as a result of a citizen initiative, and it was successfully repealed, unfortunately, because it was a very good package, but that's history. So I've had a lot of experience in elections, and particularly in referenda campaigns statewide. These are all $1 million plus campaigns.
And remind viewers also about your ties to the town of Cape Elizabeth.
Well, I mean, I'm third generation. My wife taught 39 years in the middle school. My 3 kids went through the school system. My father and aunt went through the school system. And we, are much a part of Cape Elizabeth as any family probably, although we can't compete with the Murrays and the Jordans probably since
Nobody
they've been
can.
here for many, many generations. But certainly our roots are here. And when I was working, in congressional service, I was away a lot, so I wasn't involved in local government. And I've been retired for quite a few years, and this project came up, and a friend of mine called who had formerly worked on formerly served on the Cape Elizabeth Town Council and urged me to apply for a position on the SBAC, the School Building Advisory Committee, which I did, and then spent a year and a half diving into the needs of our schools. And in the end, I want to mention this because I support, as does our group, Cape Voters, we support a $64 million alternative to the school board's project, and I have supported an investment at that level. It would be a record amount for any school project in Maine history, 100% paid for by local tax dollars. And we believe it would address all of the needs, all of the critical and essential repairs, all of the priority needs of all three schools. And this proposal that we have on the ballot gives zero to the high school and undercuts investment dramatically in the elementary school, all of that sacrifice for the new middle school, and all of it left unfunded for those schools, that's going to bring about future tax increases. The claim that there's somehow magic money in the school budget to pay for all of this stuff that was removed from the bond is just not true.
And the signs around town say that if the school bond passes, there'll be a 12% tax increase. And is that on top of what we're told to expect, an increase on the municipal and school budget of about, like, I don't know, what is it, 6 or 7%?
Yes, well, it would be. I mean, the two combined are going to raise taxes by 20%. If the 7.7% remains in place, I believe the council's final vote on the budget is May 12th. I think they have a final hearing, I think, on the 7th and then on the 12th. So the combined increase is 20%, but that's not all. As I said, there's $15 million in unfunded essential and critical repairs that the school board put into the capital improvement program. That is an unfunded wish list. There's no money in that. That's just a list. And so those projects have to be moved into annual budgets and paid for. And the idea that there's magic money there to pay for it is just not credible. As it is, I mean, this year the school budget's up 3%. They funded some capital improvements, but in order to do that, they took $1 million out of the reserve fund to supplement the budget. That's not sustainable. None of this is, unfortunately, and it just is going to create greater and greater tax burdens for the taxpayer going forward, and it's undermining the needs and services that we need to take care of for the high school and the elementary school. All of these could be dealt with the proposal that we've developed. Our proposal is a combination of new construction, and it's a lot, 53,000 square feet of new construction, plus all of the critical and essential needs are covered, and that's nearly $15 million, again, between the high school and the elementary school, plus several million more for renovation, including the conversion of the cafetorium into a state-of-the-art performing arts center, plus
How much
I
sorry,
was going
what
to
was
say,
it, what
plus new cafeterias for both schools with a shared kitchen and new secure entrances. All of those provided for a cost of 64 million, or approximately a tax increase in the mid 8% range.
that's what I was gonna ask you about the tax, percent. So, I know, there's no crystal ball, but you do have a lot of experience with elections. Given the environment, the uncertainty in the economy because of, the Trump, show, and, just there's a lot of economic factors at stake going into the June referendum. The state budget is now, hemorrhaging a little bit. There's uncertainty about whether or not the state will follow through on its, gestures about helping towns like ours fund school projects. I mean, do you have any sense of what's gonna happen in June?
I can't say that I do without polling and surveys, which I relied upon throughout my career. Um, it's just a gut seat of the pants view that it'll be a very competitive, I think, result. I'm hopeful that our message will get through, and as you point out, we're looking at major increases in taxes going forward. I've spoken to a couple counselors that know that we have collective bargaining agreements that are in the works. There's going to be double-digit increases with some of those. The teachers are due a significant increase in pay due to inflation. I believe that contract will be negotiated next year. I think the current one is good through 26, FY 2026. And we have persistent inflation. That's going to be pushing up costs for everything that we need for our municipal government and for our schools. And there's going to be a huge increase in our tax burden here and in all other communities throughout Maine and New England. This is inevitable. And then we have the impact of the Trump tariffs, which are going to increase costs of all kinds of goods that a lot of Americans have come to rely on and are not going to be replaced for a long time, if ever, by domestic manufacturing. It just means higher costs. Inflation is going to push up taxes dramatically, in my opinion, and this is not the time to be doing this all brand new middle school. We can do the job with a combination of construction and renovation and critical and essential repairs and take care of all of those needs of our schools.
Are you taking a lot of heat for filing this ethics complaint?
Well, I'm not on social media, so you know
That's wise.
I've reached a point in life where I can just do what I think is right and ignore the noise, and that's what I'm doing here. Um, I've been
What
retired for quite a few years, and this was extremely meaningful to me to try to find a solution for our community that would balance the needs of our schools with the burdens on our taxpayers. And the school board just has continued to ignore, reject, and disrespect the decision of voters. We're voting on this now for the third time. It's really very unfortunate
I
that.
think what they say, because I am on social media too much ad nauseum, but what I hear the proponents of the school bond say is that, oh, we were so close, we only missed the last bond by, less than 200 votes or something about, something like that. So they just they see it as, persistence.
Mhm.
But is that, do you think, is what's driving what do you think is driving the school board to be so, stuck?
I wish I knew the answer to that. I think that some of it just relates to groupthink and a lack of willingness on the part of members of the board or people who run for the board to think independently, to question authority, to dig, to get to the bottom of the facts, and then make decisions. This groupthink process is sort of part of our generational change. And, when I was appointed to SBAC, I saw my job as one to really question. One of the biggest problems in corporate America that was addressed back after the great financial crash in 2008 is that the boards of many corporations were nothing more than lackeys to the management. And the laws were changed to put a lot more burdens on board members, and many of them left because they didn't want the responsibilities to go with genuine oversight and asking the tough and hard questions. And unfortunately, the school board hasn't been doing that.
I think it has something to do with partisanship, and I feel that partisanship has really, divided the town more so than ever because it's infiltrated local politics. That, the Democrats send a message about the schools or now latest, the trans women's rights issues, and everybody, like you said, it's just this group think. So tell me about the group Cape Voters. I mean, is it there's some mean-spirited suggestions that there's these, big dark funders behind the scenes pulling the strings. Who are Cape Voters? What's the group, and how can people learn more about it?
Well, they are Cape voters. I think someone point out that a couple of donations came from people who aren't actually registered here, but who live here, are part of our community, own homes and pay taxes. We have hundreds of families that are snowbirds and probably aren't registered here anymore, but they contribute immensely to our community, and they've been part of it for decades. But we're all about Cape residents and voters that are supporting an alternate solution here and trying to find what we think is a balanced approach to this. So, I've known Marianne Lynch for many years. Dave Andrews, traveled the world but maintained his residency here, retired here. Dave spent a career as a construction manager, managing huge projects up to $1 billion all over the world in all continents, and very expert in the field, and a very hardworking person also. Just one of many that are involved in this effort.
So what's next? We're just going to wait and see what happens with these various avenues that you've pursued.
That's all we can do. It's in the hands of the commission at this point. As I said, we've encouraged them to request all of the financial information, get the detailed invoices that the school department received for the preparation of the graphics and design for these ads. The costs for them are known. Each of them is about $1,000 with a discount applied. So we know the rough cost those, and we believe there's been many run. I think the total is 8 or 9 that are relevant to these ballot question elections back in fall and this forthcoming one on June 10th. So we'll just have to wait for the results, and if they don't come, well, we've at least made the point that I think every citizen can think about, the credibility of the advertising, the fact that they've been paid for by tax dollars to influence the election. They'll have to factor that into the decision on how they vote.
And at the town council level, it seems to me, I guess it's discretionary whether they would put your request to the town council to order the school board to stop spending money. It's discretionary whether they'll take that up before the vote.
Yes, I mean, there isn't, a explicit procedure for making this type of request. So it's an ad hoc request we've made of the council. But again, they have the ultimate and clear authority here in our charter to deal with any potential improper use of tax dollars. It's
But why,
their
Larry,
responsibility.
My recollection, just to press you a little bit on this,
Mm-hmm.
isn't it true that the school board in the charter is the one department that has authority over its own budget? And so, like, what I think we discussed in a previous show that the town council can't tell the school board the amount of bond, for instance,
Right.
that's completely up to them. So how is this different? Why is it that the town council could tell the school board not to spend money on ads, but can't tell the school board how much the bond should be?
Yes, I would agree. That is the case. Once the funds are made available to the school board, the use of those funds within the four corners of their budget, are within their jurisdiction, and they can handle those. The question here is not that. The question is whether or not they even have the authority to expend the funds for this purpose. And our view is that's the responsibility of the town council. Because if this is not an authorized use, and they believe it's not an authorized use, they have every authority to stop it.
Well, I would hope that they would take that up quickly so that we could get the issue resolved, but the June 10th referendum is right around the corner and early
Yes.
voting starts. What do you expect for turnout? Do you have any prediction about how many people might show up in June?
I haven't a clue. I really don't. I haven't a clue. We'll just have to take it as it comes.
And then lastly, I mean, this is our, third time around.
Yes.
If this bond fails, I mean, what do you think should happen?
Well, after the first few months of my service with the SBAC, we had a pretty good insight from polling and from meetings, analysis, and so forth as to what the needs were and what the potential costs would be. And at that time, I had advocated on the finance committee and ultimately with the full committee that we set a budget for the project. And that number was $65 million to 70 million, in that range, 65 preferred. And a number of us believed that that was the way to do this project, and to give the architect and the OPM and the school board that amount of money, proceed then with the effort to address all the needs of all three schools. And we fell just a little short on that. And again, I go back to it because that's really the best answer to your question, is for the council to work with the school board and set a budget and then go about its business to addressing all these problems. It's been far too long, far too many votes at this point. We do need to move ahead, and I believe that's the best path forward. That'll get the job done for our schools and do it at an amount that is reasonable for taxpayers.
And if the bond passes, what happens? I mean, is that the end? Is the end of the discussion?
Yes, I think so. I think that the school board will then, move ahead with the project. It doesn't unfortunately solve the problems with the high school and the elementary school, and we're just going to see increasing tax uh, you know increases, and an increasing burden going forward, because we have all of these forces coalescing that are going to push up taxes dramatically over the next few years. I think that's inevitable. We know that that's coming in the collective bargaining agreements. We know there's inflation that's highly persistent in the economy. And by the way, the interest rate that was used with the pro forma to estimate the tax impact was 4%. Today, it's hard to believe, but it's now 4.5%. No one
Well, that's
knows, where that's going to go in the future, but for all of these estimates, we have consistently used the best available information, which is current market data, to make these estimates. So it's a proper estimate, but it actually should be at 4.5 right now, because that's where the 30-year AAA muni bond is at, 4.5% yield.
well, Larry Benoit, is there anything else you'd like to add before we sign off?
No, other than, well, I would like to add, I just encourage people to vote. It's so important when we make these kinds of decisions that affect people in such a direct way as a large tax increase. I think everyone hopefully will educate themselves on the issues, understand the cost and the benefits. And I think if they do that, they will vote against this bond issue and look for the school board to come up with a genuine alternative that can get the job done at a cost that's affordable for taxpayers, that's greener, and takes care of the issues for all three schools.
Larry Benoit, thanks so much for joining the show again. And thank
You're
you so much for
welcome.
your service. All right,
You're,
take
you're
care.
welcome. Thank you, Cynthia. I appreciate the opportunity to join you again.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.